Welcome back to Good Revenue. We are back with another episode about current events, business, and tech, because there's just so much happening, and we wanted to pull together some of the insights that we're seeing. Let's jump right in. First of all, we're expecting reciprocal tariffs and more economic chaos as of this coming week. So prepare for that if you've somehow missed the news around this. We'll actually have an episode next week with some analysis and insights about that. So keep that in mind as you're thinking through all of the AI news that we're about to walk through. So despite the general economic unease, big tech's AI spending is enormous. It just continues to be a huge investment. So it caught everyone's eye when Microsoft, which is planning to spend $80 billion on AI this year, cut back some of its investments in the US and the EU. Specifically, Microsoft is planning not to avail itself of 2 gigabytes of electricity. Here's the twist. Microsoft has abandoned some AI data center projects in the US and the EU. Why? According to TD Cowen's analysis, Microsoft decided not to support additional training workloads from OpenAI. At the same time, Reuters is reporting that Meta plans to spend $65 billion on AI, and Alphabet plans to spend $75 billion on AI this year. They've even taken over some of the leases that Microsoft has vacated. So while some investors are concerned, not everyone in big tech is actually anticipating an AI slowdown. Speaking of confidence, the Columbia Journalism Review just released a fascinating report. They studied 8 AI search engines. It turns out that AI systems are really terrible at saying they don't know. Maybe that's not a huge surprise to you, but here's some of the findings from this report, which I really recommend scanning. AI chatbots were bad at declining to answer questions they just didn't know the answers to. They provided incorrect answers for 60% of queries across all the platforms studied. And Perplexity in particular was wrong 37% of the time. But the worst offender appears to be Grok 3, which was wrong 94% of the time. Another interesting insight, AI search fabricated links. Again, this might not be surprising to you depending on how you've been using it. And it cited syndicated and copied versions of articles. Over half of the responses from Gemini and Grok 3 completely made up URL. Third, content licensing deals with news sources provided no guarantee of accurate citation in chatbot responses. Fourth, platforms retrieved information from publishers that had intentionally blocked their crawlers. So you might think that the way forward is to actually pay for premium AI products, right? Would make sense. Unfortunately, the study found that Perplexity Pro and Grok 3 answered more prompts correctly than their free equivalents, but they had higher error rates. So what's happening is they tend to provide definitive but wrong answers instead of declining to answer. Researchers also noted that AI's authoritative conversational tone makes it hard for users to distinguish between accurate and inaccurate information. If you're using AI, you definitely want to fact check everything independently. Strong and wrong is a real problem to try to mitigate. Next up, Anthropic's researchers tracked LLM models' unexpected inner workings, and they recently released 2 papers that challenge some of the basic assumptions about how AI actually works. Here were some of the findings. Researchers wanted to know if Claude actually thought in different languages. So, for example, if a query was in English versus French, what did the AI do? If you queried in French, would Claude think in French? It turns out that Claude sometimes thinks in a conceptual space that is shared between languages, suggesting that it has a kind of universal language of thought. If you tuned into our episode last week, you'll remember that we talked about an AI language, robots talking to robots, that was developed by a company called 11 Labs and was demoed at a hackathon a few weeks ago. So when I heard this story, I thought it was so interesting, and it made me wonder if there's a day in which the AI is actually going to talk in a language that wasn't actually intended and designed by researchers, but nonetheless is going to evolve. It's kind of interesting. Stay tuned. The second finding was that researchers didn't actually expect the model to be able to plan. But it turns out that Claude actually plans ahead, and it almost uses the end of a sentence as a North Star or a destination. This is evident in poetry, where models think of possible rhyming words in advance, and they write the next line accordingly. This actually suggests that models, instead of outputting one word at a time, may actually think on a longer time horizon. The final insight from these Anthropic papers is that Claude occasionally gives plausible arguments that agree with users instead of actually following logical steps. And the researchers tested this by using a math problem. They gave it an incorrect hint, and so they were able to catch the AI in the act of making up its fake reasoning. So this is particularly interesting when it comes to something like math, where it's not working exactly as is expected. All of these insights are fascinating. More evidence of AI languages, longer time horizons than we might have intended, and perhaps a lack of logic or a different kind of logic than we expect based on how the AI is actually trained. Our next story has to do with NASA. NASA recently sought to assess if LLMs can aid in assurance arguments that are used for critical systems like aircraft. NASA's recent technical memo reviewed existing academic literature, and they concluded that significant advancements are actually needed before LLMs can reliably generate or assess assurance arguments in real-world engineering and certification. So what that means is, for safety-critical systems, NASA remains skeptical about current AI capabilities. And our last story, if you love Post-it notes, you're going to like this news. Design thinking actually works. Despite its popularity over the last dozen years, the efficacy of design thinking or human-centered design hasn't been backed up by rigorous peer-reviewed research. A recent field experiment found teams trained in design thinking improved their performance versus control. Researchers wanted to explore how design thinking and after-action reviews affected team performance. They developed a model that explains the differences between these two learning approaches. They found that design thinking does lead to better team performance, especially for teams with more diverse tasks. The study involved teams in a manufacturing company, and it showed that design thinking led to better performance over a period of 6 months. The conclusion, design thinking does create a better learning environment, and it helps teams remember and share information more effectively. That's it for now. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you here soon. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, leave us a review, subscribe to the show, or check out another episode. We appreciate your support.